Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
There was one thing I was actually working on the other day, but I wasn't totally done with it, and it might be a little on the boring side. But I was actually coming up with I think that I discovered sort of 4 specific KPIs for measuring your company culture. So
That's
like
great.
Instead of right now, it's a very I struggle a little bit. Like I think that people ignore culture in a lot of ways because they can't get their hands around measuring.
Yes. Right.
What measures gets improved, blah, blah, blah. Your culture spits out results. And you can measure those, but we're misattributing what those results are actually caused, what's causing those results to happen the way they are, and attributing it to a lot of other things and looking for like easier fixes to affect those KPIs when it's really your company culture that you have to fix. And I think if you start to look at it that way, it starts to bring some like concrete management to something that until and including right now is this nebulous feel good. Everyone's like, oh, it's just this soft, emotional, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, this is the core of your business. You got to get your arms around this thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I know Pete Chopin goes around and is talking about culture. Everybody's talking, and he has some great things. But I think there's this slight disconnect and misunderstanding that people all still have, that they haven't quite
It's very ethereal.
It still is. And I every time I'll read, I'm a company culture nut. Like this is kind of my thing that I'm like really on. Every single time I will listen and read anything that says something about company culture, and almost all of them are talking about the tactical side of what culture looks like as far as a description of behavior, or what you can do for culture as like ideas of, hey, these things work for me. That's not this is how it works. This is what it is. It's a psychological reality that we need to deal with, and then we need to be able to measure. And so I did a bunch of work a couple weeks back. I have like 14 pages I wrote at like 3 a.m. on this. And I think that, and I'll tell you the really, I think there's 4. I think there's 4 KPIs that you can measure, and it will I can tell you by those KPIs if that company has a good culture or not. And once I tell you, you're going to go, well, yeah, this is freaking obvious. Like, and I think anything that is right most of the time is also simple.
Yeah. Right.
It's never it's not this convoluted thing. So there's 4 of them. The first one is on the front end, organic growth rate. If your company has a low organic growth rate, it's because your company culture, as experienced by the general public, is not good. They're not choosing to self-select into that, because the outward expression of your company is your company's culture. Your marketing, quote unquote, that's what your company is to its space in the public mind.
And what would you put that at? Like sub 10, sub 15? What's low?
Yeah, I didn't come up with the actual numbers, but I would think it'd be industry dependent. So for us,
right.
I think it's hard to say, because as you get bigger, it's harder, right? You're gonna have this leveling off effect of what you can do for, because you're a little bitty, you can grow double every year for a couple of years and whatever, and you're like, from our year 1 to our year 2, we tripled. So was our culture better then or now when we're doing 20% a year, right?
Yeah,
I think as long as it's healthy and it's meeting what you want, you're probably good shape. So on the front end, organic growth. The other end is the back end of the same thing, customer attrition. If once you could have good organic growth, and your actual culture, once they'll have the explanation of your culture, which is marketing and sales, like, oh, this is what we are, we wave this flag, people may self-select into it. They only stay if once they experience, they discover, okay, this is legitimate. And now what they were told, the story, now matches their actual experience. So your customer attrition, if you have people going out the back end, it's because your company sucks.
Yep.
I mean, not to be so pointed,
Oh yeah,
That's
that's
the
right.
problem. Your company's culture is bad. Then the other two, and this is where it starts to be really obvious, your recruitment. Is it impossible for you to attract employees into your company? Are you having massive problems with getting people to sign on to your company? And you can come up with lots of excuses. But I'll
Right.
tell you, just between you and me, every single person we have employed here took a pay cut to work here.
Right.
Every one. They left all kinds of things. Heather, our admin, left Apple. She'd been there for like 10 years, left Apple and took like no money because she loved what we were about. Griffin left a securities job. He makes like a third of what he made. Like
Yeah.
literally every single one. So it's not like, oh, kids don't want to work and you got to pay so much and whatever. No, it's your culture. It's how you are presenting to them. And
Yep.
then you could probably guess employee attrition on the back end. Are people turning over like crazy? You could tell them a good story and get them into work, just like on the customer side. You could tell them a great story and get them in. You're only going to keep them if you are actually living it. And an
Yeah.
interesting metric on that one is, I don't know if you saw the MPMA put out their survey results from last year.
Yeah. You sent it to me.
Okay, if you look through that, one of the things that just killed me was the percentage of operating ratio, the revenue that they say the average company reported in payroll was 32%. 32% in wages. We have never been under 49% in
Yeah.
wages for our
Right.
company. So that tells me most companies are strangling their company culture in that regard.
Yeah.
They are just they're sucking the life out of it. And then when you look at that same thing, the average profit margin at the end was like 19%. It was 20%. I'm like, okay, so you're make that 10%, that's above 10%. Let's say it's an extra 10, it's to 20. That should
Right.
all go to wages. All of it. So instead of 32, it should be 42 at least. I think that you're strangling these companies, and then you're seeing all the results because the complaints are, I can't get anybody to work here. I can't get anybody to stay. These kids don't work here. How are we going to get customers? We have to claw and fight, and then we got to do acquisitions because we can't get customers. I can't keep customers. How do you keep people from canceling? Like, okay, do a better job. That never comes up in the how to keep. When you listen to the podcast on
Yeah.
it never
Don't
comes up.
suck. Yeah.
Do a better job. Invest in your people, invest in your product so that it's quality enough that people want to stay. But I think if you look at those 4 KPIs, organic growth rate, customer attrition, recruitment, and employee retention, I can tell you everything about that company as
Yep.
far as like if they're good or if they're not, and if they're living it or not.
Yeah. I think that's really cool. Um.
Well, when I got that survey, there was another aspect that I thought of that it became really clear as well. I think there's 3 parts of this industry, 3 different factors or sectors, let's say. There's the big giant ones. We know
Yes.
that. And there's little teeny ones like us that we talked about. Then there's the little ones, but they're the fast grow ones. On one side, you'll have the craftsman type, I'm in this industry. And then on the other side, you have the fast growth,
Yes.
I'm looking to start a business that will make me a lot of money, and I don't give a crap about this industry.
Yeah.
I'll say I love it. I'll say, oh, this is great. The best people. They're just the best people, and they're great, and blah, blah, blah. No, you're door knocking. You're doing efficiency all the way, and that's all you care about. And if you look at it, there's Fraction, Boardroom Buzz, and Pest Daily, Seth Garber's company that does training and podcast and CPA. And then on the other side, you have PCO bookkeepers. You have Pest Posse guys doing their podcast, like us doing our podcast, and then Pest Posse doing their training platform, which is not like Pest Daily's platform, which is all like how to sell, how to keep people from canceling, how to market your thing. Like those are important things, but you have one side of this that is very focused on the business and growing it as fast as possible and putting as much money in your pocket as you can. And then the other side, you have people that are craftsmen that are in this industry and like working this as a career in the industry. And it's really interesting though to see that there's either side of this. Like there's this
Yeah.
polarization. And I think where I always got frustrated is not recognizing that, and then like going, oh, well, how come you're not like interested in the same things, or your values don't align with mine at all? Well, because they don't. And
Right.
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
They're that. And like not everybody is going to go, yes, I'm like an insane craftsman at this thing. But I I get annoyed when, and it's usually on the, because I'll say our side, the craftsman side will look at the business guys, the fast growth guys, a little bit and envy them, feel a
Yeah.
little pressure and feel like, I kind of suck, and they'll learn from them and whatever.
Yeah.
The fast growth side does not give a crap what we're doing.
Yeah.
They don't care about the freaking roaches and studying that crap. They don't care. They're like,
Yeah.
does it help me sell more stuff? No. Then what are you doing?
Like they're not going to take care of the roaches anyways.
Doesn't even
Rent a
matter.
Kill is going to not take care
Yeah.
of the roaches after they buy their company.
Yeah. Yeah, and it killed me because one of them was on. I was listening on my way in and on a podcast. And he was a door knocker guy, and they were interviewing him. And oh, it's so great, and you're awesome. And they were asking about the what was it? The non-service rate. Like how many accounts do you sell and never actually get to? And it was like 20%. And I'm like, you mean you talk to a customer of your company, and they were touting it because it was so good. They're like, oh, that's like the best I've ever heard. I'm like, 20% of the people you talk to heard the name of your company and then never heard back from you. Like no one ever showed up to do the job. You couldn't get to it. Like that is embarrassing. Like almost criminal. I just, it turns my stomach. I'm like, 20% of them? And then they have a whole division of people just to deal with customers that want to cancel and give them all kinds of roadblocks and fees and ways, techniques to keep them from canceling instead of just
Right.
doing the work. Like you're putting so much effort into this to keep this nonsense together and keep the wheels on. And it came to head more for me because I got a call from a girl who owns a company out in Rochester. And she's fabulous. She calls me every once in a while, like she has a quote and she doesn't know, like, oh, I got this big warehouse. She's trying to do commercials. She's like, I got a big warehouse. I don't know how to do. How do I quote it? Blah, blah, blah. And I talked to her about this one, and it was going to be tough. And I was like, I would price this super high, and then if you don't get it, you don't care, because it was a grass seed warehouse that had like no walls. And I'm like, yeah, there's going to be a million mice. It's going to be horrible. You're going to have to be there all the time, whatever. And she goes, I wanted somebody to tell me what I was thinking. Speak back to me the words that I was because she was already thinking, I don't think I should do this. Like,
Right.
This is going to be a nightmare. And I told her this, I go, you have a lot of implied pressure that is not coming from you. It's coming from everyone around you saying you have to sell every job. You have to grow as fast as you possibly can. You have to be profitable. You have to make all the money. It's okay if you don't win some of these. You don't want them. Like, it's all right. Just grow at the pace you can do and do a good job at, and it's okay. And she's like, oh my God, thank you. I just needed somebody to say that. Like, so
Dude, that's so true. Yeah.
We're
You're
given
right.
a different impression out there. And I think it comes from those fast growth guys. That's where that comes from.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I think it is really helpful to just I don't know if maybe it's just becoming more clear now, or maybe as we talk about it more, but I think that line is getting drawn more clearly, and just understanding, recognizing that there is a difference. If you're trying to do more of the craftsman style, you shouldn't be looking over the aisle and comparing yourself to the door knockers. Like, it's just and that there's a sliding scale on both sides, likely,
Totally.
But yeah, I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, so that's stuff. I got extra ranty tonight. I'm tired. I'm like like extra full on rant.
Great. I love the rants.
Oh my
Way to
God.
go.
Oh my God, it's nuts. Do you think that sounds valid? Does it sound nuts, or?
Well, I mean, I think that it makes complete sense. What I would be curious about is then you take I think those are great KPIs. And then it's like, well, then there's 1,000,001 practical things, sub points under each of those
Oh,
of like, okay,
totally.
now how do we bolster all of these?
Yeah.
And that's a really practical guidebook for
Yeah.
somebody trying to make sure their
yes.
culture is in good shape.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that's the thing is I kept hearing the recommendations that people would give when they were talking about those KPIs were not going to be things. They were all Band-Aid tactical fixes that aren't going to actually solve the problem in the long run. They're like, well, did you try running ads this way or doing pay-per-click? Did you try? You're like, no, you got like, you're bleeding to death. And you're like, well, you could take some ibuprofen,
Yeah.
take some aspirin. You're
Did
like,
you drink
no.
enough water today?
Did you? Yeah, did you? Yeah. And so, like, I think the real fixes are a lot harder, which is why we don't really talk about them.
Yeah.
But then we just talk about, well, how can I just put a Band-Aid on this
Yeah.
and make it better? And I'm like, that's not how you fix that. That problem is a different sort of tactic.
Yeah, that's right. I remember there's a guy, he runs a huge like transformer. They buy like used transformers, they refab them and
Wow.
they sell them. And he's like one of like 2 companies in the nation that does this. He's got a big company, like 250 people. And I was talking to him about a bunch of random business stuff, but specifically about hiring an outbound salesperson.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, it's like I have a whole outbound sales team. It's like my recommendation, it's like you're new enough, you're still figuring this out. I would highly recommend work with the inbound leads you have and make sure those are really profitable. Make sure you're closing well on those and that you're educating well on those. He's like, you probably have a lot of slack just in your inbound lead process that you're dropping the ball on.
Yeah.
That you shouldn't even worry yet about the outbound thing.
Right.
And it's funny because I hired that part-time commercial sales guy. I let him go about a month ago.
Oh, wow.
And he was just working like one day, 1.5 days a week. But I was like, I didn't have even close to the bandwidth to be able to provide him with an adequate, like, this is what your job looks like, and this is what the expectations are and stuff. I'm like, I'm swamped. I'm overwhelmed with the inbound leads right now. I need to just get my crap together in that regard first and be faithful with that. So
yeah, no, that's a good point, because if you accidentally got your hands on somebody awesome and you brought them in, you're not going to be able to sit and coach with them and work together, because what they're going to bring to the table is going to modify your protocols and procedures. I don't mean service wise, but like how you present to the market. And like, how do we do this? And what's our sales process look like? And that's all dependent on what your business really is trying to do. And you're still like in the developmental stage of really discovering that.
Yep.
I think with our salesperson coming in this end of this summer, beginning of the fall, I think it was a great time. And I think if it was much earlier, it would have been way worse.
And you guys you're not just from like a business size and that, but like just from how long you guys have been around, from how much experience you have in the industry, like you're so much more established.
Sure.
And I think having somebody, sounds like she's just an absolute killer. I'm so stoked that you found her. But like having her be able to walk into that is a dynamite combo. And that's what I really want. But I think I've got a lot of groundwork I have to lay first to get there.